Have you ever asked yourself this question? Why do avoidants disappear so easily, yet sometimes return when you least expect it? Why do they walk away when things feel meaningful, when the connection feels real, when everything seems to be building towards something deeper and even more confusing? Why does chasing them almost always make things worse? If you have ever been involved with someone who pulls away the moment emotions become serious, then you already know the pain of that silence, the unanswered messages, the distance that suddenly appears where warmth once lived. It leaves your mind spinning with questions that never seem to find answers. You start wondering what you did wrong. Was it something you said? Did you love too much? Did you care too deeply? Did you push them away without realizing it? So you do what most people do in that moment. You try harder. You send another message. You explain your feelings. You try to fix what feels broken. You think if you just say the right words, if you show enough love, if you prove your intentions, they will understand and come back. But here is the brutal truth that most people never hear. That instinct, the instinct to chase, explain, and hold on tighter, is exactly the thing that pushes avoidance further away. Not because you are wrong for caring, but because the avoidant mind works in a completely different way than most people realize. And until you understand this psychology, you will keep repeating the same painful cycle. You will keep giving more energy, more emotion, more effort, and yet somehow they keep disappearing. It feels unfair. It feels confusing. It feels like trying to hold water in your hands. But what if the problem was never your worth? What if the problem was never your love? What if the real issue is that no one ever taught you how the avoidant mind actually works? Because here is something most people don't realize. Avoidants don't respond to pressure the way emotionally secure people do. When someone emotionally healthy feels love and connection, they usually move closer. They lean into the bond. They grow more comfortable with emotional intimacy. But an avoidant brain reacts very differently. The moment emotional intensity rises, something inside them becomes uncomfortable. Not always consciously, not always intentionally, but deep in their psychology, intimacy can trigger a hidden alarm. And when that alarm goes off, their instinct is not to move closer. Their instinct is to create distance. So when you try to pull them back, their mind interprets it as pressure. When you try to explain your feelings, their mind interprets it as expectation. When you try to fix the relationship, their mind feels a loss of freedom. And the more pressure they feel, the stronger their need to escape becomes. That is why the pattern feels so confusing. The more you try to repair the connection, the more distant they become. The more you show how much you care, the more they seem to retreat. It feels like you are doing everything right, yet somehow everything goes wrong. And this is where many people make the biggest mistake of all. They begin to believe the silence means rejection. They believe the distance means they were not enough. They start questioning their value. But the truth is much deeper than that. Avoidants are not necessarily running away from you. Many times they are running away from the emotional pressure they feel inside themselves. Their mind is wired to protect independence, to maintain control, to avoid emotional overwhelm. And when those internal fears are triggered, their instinct is not connection. Their instinct is escape. This is why begging rarely works. Explaining rarely works. Chasing almost never works, because those actions accidentally activate the very fear that makes them leave. And once that fear is activated, their mind focuses on one thing only: distance. But here is where the story becomes very interesting, because there is something most people never realize about avoidance. Something that changes everything once you understand it. Avoidants rarely return when they feel chased, but they often return when the pressure disappears, when the emotional weight lifts, when the space around them suddenly feels calm again. And this creates a powerful psychological paradox. The very thing most people believe will bring someone back, chasing them, is often the exact thing that guarantees they stay away. While the one behavior that feels the hardest in the moment, the one behavior that requires real inner strength, is often the one that changes everything. And that behavior is not about manipulation. It is not about playing games. It is about understanding human psychology at a deeper level. In this video, you are going to discover the one shift that completely changes how avoidants see you. A shift that removes pressure. A shift that awakens curiosity. A shift that often makes avoidants start thinking about you again, even when they once seemed completely distant. But more importantly, you will discover something even more powerful: how to regain your emotional power, how to stop feeling like you are chasing someone who keeps running, and how to become the kind of person who naturally commands respect, space, and attention without begging for it. Because once you understand this, everything about the dynamic begins to change. So stay with this message until the end, because the insight you are about to hear is the one thing most people realize far too late, after they have already pushed the avoidant further away. And once you truly understand it, you will never look at this situation the same way again. The moment distance appears, most people feel an intense urge to close the gap. Silence becomes heavy. Uncertainty becomes painful. The mind starts searching for solutions. You check the last conversation again. You replay every message in your head. You analyze every small detail, hoping to find the exact moment where everything changed. And slowly, a quiet fear begins to grow. The fear of losing them. That fear pushes people into action. It whispers that doing something is better than doing nothing. It tells you that if you reach out one more time, maybe things will return to how they were. So the messages begin: a thoughtful text, a long explanation, an attempt to repair the connection. But something strange happens. Instead of bringing the person closer, the gap becomes even wider. Replies become slower. Energy becomes colder. And eventually, the quiet distance turns into complete disappearance. This is the moment when confusion reaches its peak. Because from your perspective, you were trying to save something meaningful. You showed care, you showed vulnerability, you showed emotional honesty, yet somehow those efforts produced the opposite result. To understand why this happens, it is necessary to look deeper into the psychology behind avoidant behavior. Avoidant individuals often grow up learning that emotional closeness feels overwhelming. Somewhere in their past experiences, intimacy became associated with discomfort, pressure, or loss of independence. Because of this, their nervous system develops a protective pattern. When a relationship begins to feel intense, their mind interprets it as a potential threat to personal freedom. This reaction does not always happen consciously. In many cases, the person is not even fully aware of why they suddenly feel the need to step back. They simply feel a powerful internal signal telling them to create space. Imagine standing in a room where the walls slowly begin moving closer. Even if the movement is slow, the instinct is to step away and regain breathing room. For someone with avoidant tendencies, emotional closeness can feel similar to that closing space. The more intense the emotional environment becomes, the stronger their urge to regain distance. This is why traditional relationship advice often fails in these situations. Advice like communicate more, share your feelings, or fight for the relationship may work well with secure individuals. But with avoidant personalities, those same actions can accidentally increase internal pressure. When they feel someone pulling harder for connection, their mind reacts by protecting autonomy. This protection mechanism can look like coldness, detachment, or sudden withdrawal. Yet internally, something very different may be happening. They may still think about the connection. They may still remember the good moments. They may even feel a quiet sense of loss, but their instinct for emotional safety is stronger than their desire for closeness in that moment. And this is where many people unknowingly fall into a psychological trap. They believe that more effort will eventually break through the distance. They believe persistence will prove their sincerity. So they continue reaching out, hoping the other person will finally understand. But from the avoidant perspective, repeated attempts can feel like increasing pressure. Every message becomes another reminder of expectations. Every emotional conversation becomes another weight on their mind. Instead of feeling invited into connection, they feel pushed toward it. And pressure has a powerful effect on the avoidant nervous system. Pressure activates resistance. The stronger the push, the stronger the retreat. This dynamic creates a cycle that many people experience but rarely understand. One person moves closer, hoping to repair the bond. The other person moves further away, hoping to restore emotional space. Neither person is intentionally trying to hurt the other. Both are simply reacting to their internal wiring. One is driven by the desire for reassurance, the other is driven by the need for independence. Without awareness of this pattern, the cycle repeats again and again. Effort increases, distance increases. Eventually, the connection reaches a breaking point, and at that moment, it may appear as if the avoidant individual simply stopped caring. But the reality is often more complicated. Avoidants do not necessarily lose interest in the person. What they lose is their sense of comfort within the emotional environment. When the environment feels overwhelming, their mind focuses on regaining control. Control often comes through separation. Once distance is created, their nervous system slowly begins to calm down. The emotional noise fades, the pressure disappears, and something interesting begins to happen. With the pressure gone, their mind finally has room to breathe again. Thoughts become clearer, memories return without the weight of expectation attached to them. This is the moment when curiosity can quietly begin to grow. Not because someone convinced them to return, but because the emotional atmosphere has changed. Understanding this psychological pattern is important for one simple reason. It reveals that many of the actions people take when they feel desperate for connection are actually working against them. The instinct to chase feels natural. The instinct to explain feels logical. Yet those instincts often reinforce the very dynamic that caused the distance in the first place. Recognizing this pattern requires emotional strength. It asks you to step outside the cycle of reaction. It asks you to see the situation not only from your own feelings, but also from the internal experience of the other person. When you begin to understand the avoidant mindset, the situation stops feeling like a personal rejection. Instead, it becomes a psychological dance between closeness and freedom. And once you see the dance clearly, you can begin to move differently within it. Because the real shift does not come from forcing connection. It comes from changing the emotional environment in a way that removes the need for escape. And that shift begins with one powerful realization that most people never expect. Once this pattern becomes clear, a powerful realization begins to form. The entire dynamic was never about convincing someone to stay. It was about understanding what makes them feel safe enough to return. For many people, this idea feels strange at first. Every instinct says the opposite. When someone important begins to drift away, the natural reaction is to hold tighter. You want to protect the connection. You want to stop the distance before it grows larger. You want to show that the relationship matters. But emotional reality often moves in the opposite direction of instinct. The more someone feels pulled, the more their inner resistance awakens. Their mind begins searching for ways to restore personal space. This reaction is not always visible from the outside. It happens quietly inside their thoughts. A feeling that something is becoming too heavy. A sense that expectations are increasing. A belief that their independence is slowly disappearing. When these feelings grow stronger, the person begins to protect themselves by stepping back. At that moment, most people double their efforts. They try to clarify misunderstandings. They try to reassure the other person. They try to hold the connection together through persistence. Yet these attempts unintentionally strengthen the very reaction they are trying to prevent. Instead of reducing emotional tension, they amplify it. This is why the true shift begins when the pattern stops being fueled. Not through arguments, not through emotional persuasion, but through something much quieter. A change in personal energy, a moment where the chase finally ends. This shift does not mean indifference. It does not mean pretending not to care. It simply means releasing the urge to control the outcome. When someone stops trying to force closeness, the emotional atmosphere changes completely. Suddenly, the weight that once existed in the connection disappears. There is no longer pressure in the air. There is no longer a sense that someone is demanding answers, reassurance, or commitment. Instead, there is space. Space has a powerful effect on the avoidant mind. Without emotional tension pushing against them, their nervous system begins to relax. The need to protect independence slowly fades. And when that defensive reaction fades, something unexpected often appears. Curiosity. Human psychology works in interesting ways. When someone feels pushed, their attention focuses on escape. But when they feel free, their attention becomes open again. Thoughts that were previously blocked by stress can finally surface. Memories of positive moments begin to return. Conversations that once felt overwhelming can now be remembered with a calmer perspective. In this relaxed state, the mind is no longer reacting. It is reflecting. Reflection creates room for new thoughts. They may begin wondering how you are doing. They may start thinking about the connection in a different light. They may even begin to question whether the distance was necessary. None of these thoughts appear because someone demanded them. They appear because the emotional pressure that once surrounded the relationship is gone. Freedom changes perception. When someone feels free, they can choose to move closer. But when someone feels trapped, they only focus on escape. This is why the most powerful move in this situation is often the one that feels the most difficult. Allowing silence, allowing distance, allowing life to move forward without constant attempts to pull the other person back. This choice requires deep inner strength. It means resisting the urge to send another message. It means resisting the impulse to explain everything again. It means trusting that forcing connection will never create the peace that genuine closeness requires. When someone reaches this point, something important begins to happen inside them as well. Their emotional focus shifts. Instead of placing all attention on someone who stepped away, they begin turning attention toward their own growth. They start rebuilding their sense of balance. They reconnect with personal goals. They invest energy into their own well-being. This transformation creates a powerful change in presence. When someone becomes centered in their own life, their energy becomes calm instead of anxious. Calm energy is very different from the emotional intensity that once existed. It does not demand validation. It does not chase reassurance. It simply exists with quiet confidence. And confidence has a unique psychological effect on others. It removes the emotional weight that once existed in the connection. Without that weight, interaction becomes easier. Communication becomes lighter. The entire atmosphere shifts. Many avoidant individuals begin to notice this difference. They sense that something has changed. The pressure they once felt is gone. The emotional intensity that once overwhelmed them has disappeared. Instead, they see someone who seems grounded, independent, and emotionally steady. This new dynamic creates a completely different experience for them. The connection no longer feels like something that will consume their freedom. Instead, it begins to look like something that can exist without threatening their independence. And this is where the real turning point often appears, because attraction does not grow from pressure, it grows from space. Interest does not develop when someone feels controlled. It develops when someone feels free to approach. By stepping out of the old pattern, you allow a new pattern to form. One where both individuals can breathe, one where emotional tension no longer dominates every interaction. This shift changes everything. What once felt like a desperate attempt to hold on to someone slowly transforms into a position of strength, and from that position, something surprising often begins to unfold. As this new pattern settles in, something deeper begins to unfold inside you. The focus slowly moves away from trying to influence another person and shifts towards something far more powerful, your own inner stability. For a long time, your emotional state may have depended on their responses. A message from them could brighten your entire day. Their silence could cloud your thoughts for hours. When someone holds that much influence over your emotions, life starts revolving around their behavior. But once you step out of that cycle, you begin reclaiming control over your own peace. You wake up and notice that your mood no longer depends on whether someone texted you back. Your attention moves toward things that genuinely matter in your life. Work becomes clearer. Friendships feel stronger. Personal goals start gaining energy again. This transformation is not loud or dramatic. It happens quietly. One day you realize that your thoughts are no longer trapped in constant analysis. Instead of wondering what they are thinking, you begin asking yourself a different question. What kind of life do I want to build? That question changes everything. When your energy moves toward personal growth, your presence becomes different. You stop radiating emotional urgency. Instead, you carry a calm sense of direction. People naturally notice this kind of change. Confidence does not come from pretending to be strong. It grows from knowing that your happiness is not controlled by someone else's decisions. This shift is powerful because it removes the invisible weight that once existed in the relationship dynamic. When someone feels that weight, they often sense responsibility for another person's emotional state. That responsibility can feel overwhelming, especially for individuals who already struggle with emotional closeness. But when that pressure disappears, the entire atmosphere changes. They no longer feel like they must respond in a certain way to protect your feelings. They no longer feel that every interaction carries hidden expectations. Instead, they begin to see someone who stands firmly in their own life, someone who values themselves, someone who is not chasing approval. This creates a completely different perception. Human beings are naturally drawn toward people who appear emotionally secure. Stability signals strength. Independence signals self-respect. When those qualities appear, curiosity often follows. The person who once stepped away may start noticing subtle changes. They may wonder how you became so calm. They may question why you are no longer reacting the way you used to. They may even feel a quiet pull to reconnect, not because they were forced to, but because something about your presence now feels different. This is an important moment, but it must be approached with awareness. The goal was never to manipulate their behavior. The goal was to grow beyond the cycle that once drained your energy. If someone chooses to reach out again, the interaction now begins from a healthier foundation. You are no longer standing in a place of desperation. You are standing in a place of balance. From that position, you can observe the situation with clarity. You can notice whether their actions align with genuine effort. You can recognize whether they are willing to meet you halfway. And most importantly, you understand that your life continues moving forward regardless of the outcome. This realization creates true emotional freedom. When freedom exists within you, relationships stop feeling like survival. They become choices. You choose who deserves your time. You choose who respects your boundaries. You choose who contributes positively to your life. That power changes the entire dynamic. Instead of trying to prove your value, you simply live it. Instead of trying to earn someone's attention, you focus on building a life that naturally attracts meaningful connections. This mindset protects your emotional well-being. It prevents you from falling back into patterns that once caused pain. It reminds you that a healthy connection should feel mutual, not one-sided. And when you live from this place of self-respect, something remarkable happens. Your presence becomes magnetic, not because you are trying to impress anyone, but because authenticity carries a quiet strength that people recognize immediately. Individuals who once walked away may begin to see you through a completely different lens. They may notice the peace in your energy. They may feel the absence of emotional pressure. They may realize that the person they once left behind is no longer standing in the same place. You have grown. You have evolved. You have become someone who values their own path. At that point, whether someone returns or continues walking their own road becomes far less important, because the greatest transformation has already taken place. You have rediscovered your own worth. You have rebuilt your emotional independence. You have learned that your happiness cannot be placed in someone else's hands. And once that lesson becomes part of who you are, no situation can take your power away again. You move forward with confidence, you move forward with clarity, and you carry a quiet understanding that the strongest relationships are never built through chasing. They grow naturally when two individuals choose each other freely. When that freedom exists, connection becomes genuine, respect becomes mutual, and love, when it appears, stands on a foundation that no fear can easily shake.